there.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi.
Malaya, your puppy is adorable.
Thank you. He's being a little naughty right now, so in the arms.
Apologies, I'm not on camera. I just landed in Chicago, so I'm just going to be without camera today.
Okay, not a problem. So I would like to thank you, both of you, for the time and setting up the meeting. And if I'm not saying you wrong, Himalaya, right?
Yeah, just like the mountains.
Yes, I was gonna say that you have a nice name. It's mountain, the Great Mountain. Okay, so where are you from, Himalaya?
So I actually was born in India, and so where I'm named after.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
We are kind of neighbors. I'm from Bangladesh. I grew up in Dhaka.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I stayed in Dhaka till I was 20, and I came
Okay.
here. Right. So should we start?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to be on camera as well, correct?
Right. It's gonna be on camera. So sometime soon it's gonna be on YouTube, and I'll definitely let you know.
Okay. All right. Let me put the pup down.
No, it's fine. Puppy can stay. It's pretty. No problem. It's part of life. We all work from home. Most of the people we are all work from home.
Yeah.
So it's totally fine. Not a problem. It makes the video better, I guess. I love animals. So just take it as a conversation. It's nothing to do with the interview or anything. Feel free. I have some questions ready. So I would like to ask you, like, can you tell us about the background and how you get involved in venture capital industry?
Yes, absolutely. Also, I just wanted to ask if you needed this to be recorded or because I know this is not your Zoom. So,
I'm recording. It's fine.
oh, you are.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
no
I'm
problem.
sorry, I was just exiting the airplane. I mean, so I was going to say, do you need me to record it, or you're
No.
okay?
No.
And
It's been recorded. Not a problem.
Okay,
okay,
okay.
perfect. Okay, thank you, Himalaya, for that.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so you wanted to understand like a little bit of the background of the fund, um,
Yeah.
or like my background.
I'll ask about your background at the end. So tell me,
Okay,
about VC Himalaya, not the person, but I'll ask you that question. Not a problem. Before we finish.
great. Okay, so a little bit more about the fund. So the BFM Fund is a seed stage fund, and so when we think about who that supports, we're prioritizing investment into Black and innovative founders who have a different lived experience and can participate in the innovation ecosystem through that different lived experience. That's like one of the main things that I want to highlight here is that it's not just about having a different cultural identity, but more so how you utilize that different lived experience to then come to the table with different solutions to maybe different problems that aren't being addressed. And that's what we're looking for is that ability to actually create some uniqueness and innovativeness into this innovation ecosystem. And so that's what the fund does is that the main venture fund prioritizes investment into Black and innovative founders across the United States at the seed stage. So what the stage that we're looking at is those that have already demonstrated some level of traction through revenue. And that can be one-off revenue, that's fine. It doesn't have to be recurring revenue, but it shows us that the founders can sell into the market, right? And so that's what we're prioritizing. Prior to this, I worked in other venture funds, and what I noticed was that there was a lot of people that came in with just ideas, but because they were well networked, then they were able to get funding on those ideas. And then later on, what we found was that they didn't really have product market fit. But women and people of color and diverse individuals in general who don't have networks generally tend to be very customer centric and can show us through actual data of traction that customers want whatever their product is. And so that's what we're prioritizing.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'd like to ask you, like, it's this fund, like BFM. It's a black focused fund, and what is inspired you to, I mean, establish this, and also what sets apart from the other VCs?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I think that this is a question that gets brought up often, and I think that it's interesting because in our like social ecosystem, there's a tendency for, particularly in the BIPOC community, for those in the BIPOC community to only care about their own cultural representation and their own subset of in the BIPOC community. But for us, it's really, really important that we look across the BIPOC sphere and are able to help support different entrepreneurs. One of the reasons that we chose Fund One to be focused on Black and innovative entrepreneurs is because we know that within the BIPOC sphere, there are different groups that have different needs because of the historical context, as well as how they're received and how, like, what the different pain points are. And so we wanted to be really focused on one segment of the BIPOC community that we felt like really, really demonstrates the ability to be successful in entrepreneurship. When we think about who has done the most with the least historically in the United States, the Black community is ones that we feel like has already demonstrated a huge propensity for success. And so when we think about from venture capital, being able to accelerate businesses that have a high likelihood of scaling and exiting, we thought of Black founders. And so that's why we wanted to be able to create a venture fund around Black founders so that we could also utilize dollars to facilitate a change of ideology around when people think about who can be a successful entrepreneur, they think about Black founders.
Okay, here you talk about BIPOC, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can you explain a little bit about this? What is that? Because some of the listeners, they may don't know what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So the term BIPOC actually came from POC. So POC is people of color. But what tended to happen actually was that when we just talked about POC, people of color, organizations that wanted to be diverse would take that and then hire like the lowest hanging fruit. So oftentimes that was Asian people, that were people with like, that weren't like super marginalized in some context. And then there was a recognition that even within people of color, there's different levels of systemic oppression that then leads to different communities within the POC group that need to be identified, which is where the term BIPOC came from, because it's an understanding that even though we are all people of color, Black and Indigenous people are oftentimes not represented when we just think about POC and we think about the implications of that on diverse hiring and diverse leadership and the inclusion of different people in organizations and corporations. So the term BIPOC specifically calls out the need to look at Black and Indigenous representation in the context of the whole people of color community.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for clarification. And tell me a little about your approach to potential investment and also your decision-making process.
Sure. And your first question, Hassan, was about the long-term impact?
No, it's your decision-making process was the second one, the approach to the investment. So how do you approach to an investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we actually do is we have regional entrepreneurship hubs wherever we do investment, and we try and set those up across the U.S., but we have a primary regional hub in Oregon and Virginia. And so what we do is we have the Emerge Initiative, and so that's a nonprofit arm of BFM, and we try to prioritize bringing in more people who are already have side hustles and be able to transform them into their main hustle. In that way, we're actually creating our own pipeline of deals that we then invest from later. So that's one route. Certainly, we have other routes of being able to partner with accelerators, universities, co-investors, right? And then our decision-making process is a little bit unique. So one, we have industry-specific criteria. So oftentimes when you think about and I worked at other venture funds, they would use the same framework for all of the companies, right? And so then when you're thinking about B2B SaaS, it might be highly scalable and capital efficient. And then you put that on a food and beverage company, and you think like, oh, well, then that's not scalable and that's not capital efficient. That company could actually be doing really well in the context of a food and beverage company, but just not in the context of comparing it to a company that's not in its industry. And so what we do is we do two segmentations. The first is it a tech product? Is it a tech company, or is it a product-based company? And then even within that, then we look at what is the business model. Is it B2B or is it B2C? Because a B2B tech company is going to look very different than a B2C tech company, which is certainly going to look very different than a B2B product-based company, right? And so we look at those four segmentations and then look at the verticals to be able to assure that we're utilizing industry-specific metrics to actually accurately evaluate the company. The other part of our evaluation is that we use principles of effectual entrepreneurship, and that actually prioritizes a lot of values that women and people of color already exhibit. I mentioned to you earlier, Hasan, of like being able to think about customer centricity, capital efficiency, market responsiveness. So those are all the principles of effectual entrepreneurship that we prioritize and put into our evaluation criteria.
Okay, so that basically gives me an option to ask you the next question, which is you're trying to make a social impact for sure, and you're also seeking return. VC is a financial company for sure. And how do you balance that social impact and the financial success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has been something that we've had to figure out for sure. So one, I think it's really helped that we have our philanthropic arm and then we have our venture arm. And the philanthropic arm is all about being able to help the promotion of more diverse individuals getting into small business ownership. So not every company is right for venture capital. Just because they are a sustainable business, because they're a great business, doesn't actually make them a good candidate for a scalable, acquirable venture. And not all companies should be scalable or acquirable, right? And so we definitely utilize our philanthropic arm to help support a wide variety of different startup organizations and individuals who then become small business owners. And that's really important to us from an economic development standpoint. The venture part is the way that we create impact on that side is we're looking for companies that we're able to then help through the pipeline of scaling and being acquired so that it's a different trajectory, right? Like the impact there is like there's a return, there's a capital return for sure. There's a capital return for our investors, there's a capital return for the fund. There's also a significant capital return for the entrepreneurs and their families and their communities. But the impact we're trying to make there is that if we actually help the majority of our companies move through that pipeline where they get to be acquired, then we start to change the narrative around when people think about putting investment dollars, who to put investment dollars into. That's the societal change, and that's the impact that we're trying to create.
Awesome. So can you share a success story from your portfolio where you invested and that helped them grow and then give them a chance to make a difference significantly?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our companies is Year One, and Year One is a company that primarily works with other businesses and organizations. And it's called Year One because they work with organizations to be able to recruit diverse, underrepresented talent within the engineering field. But they also, in addition, help those corporations and organizations retain that diverse talent and help put them on a promotional track within the first year. So that's often like a huge disadvantage is that even when organizations are able to recruit diverse talent, they're not able to retain that those individuals who are representing diverse talent because oftentimes there's tokenization. The organization structurally isn't available to be able to be supportive of diverse talent, and diverse individuals feel alienated and isolated when it comes to being able to have career development and skill building. And so that's what Year works on, is being able to create that community and working with the organization itself to structurally be able to put more diverse individuals on promotional tracks. When we met them, they had just actually finished doing the Techstars Accelerator, and they were still pretty early. And so we invested in them alongside some brilliant co-investors. Since then, we've worked with them pretty closely, and they have done so well. They actually now have a contract with Microsoft and Accenture and a few other really large like corporate names, and that's really helpful because when we think about corporations, that's where we see the biggest drop off in diverse talent, and so being able to help a lot more organizations be able to retain diverse talent is a huge win for us.
Wow, that's a great job. I think I know about the company, the Texture, and I had a chance. I believe I had a chance to disclose their investment in my newsletter. I
Oh,
believe so.
cool.
Was it like a year ago or a year and a half ago?
Okay. Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
like
it was
that.
a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
In 20, now my years are blending together. It was 2021 actually when we
Right
first
after COVID, like these years are like crazy. You feel like, oh, it's 19, 21, or
Yeah,
22.
I'm not sure what year we're in, but our first investment into year one was in January of 2021. And then we actually followed on with an investment in spring of 2022.
Yeah, I think I covered that. I covered that, and so when you cover a news, you put a picture of the VC sometimes, or the co-founders. It depends on the story. I think I covered one of your story back in 2021. Sometimes I forgot, but it's yeah,
Amazing,
I did.
amazing.
So when I was talking to the peer, we talked about it. Like, hey, I know her, and I would like to talk to her. So I know you from like 2021. It's a great job you guys are doing. I would like to say. Okay.
Thank you.
What is the unique advantage of a BFM, and what's your overall contribution if you would like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one, I think there's a couple differentiators, but one is definitely the fund strategy. So, oftentimes, what we find is that there's a lot, and we love it, right? In the last few years, there's been a huge decentralization, and a lot more capital has been flowing into the pre seed and seed stage. But when we think about creating intentionality of inclusion, it's not just the money that needs to be there at the seed stage. There's also a lack of funding that's happening at the Series A stage. And particularly, because I've worked in venture capital for a while, what I started to notice through data was the companies that go the farthest, fastest, and are on a position to be acquired actually have industry specific investors on their cap table. And these are not just like industry specific investors that like are doing one-off investment. It's large firms that all they do is invest in one particular vertical. So then they know all the buyers and players in the space, they know all the vendors and contractors, and they're able to help not just through money, but also through a lot more non financial resources help a company scale. And so what we actually did was we sourced out different industry specific vertical leaders in that space. And what a vertical leader means is that they've been doing industry specific investing for a while. They have a really good track record of exiting companies. And then what we did is we looked at their portfolio and we saw a huge lack of diversity, particularly in Black founders. And so our pitch to them was, let us partner with you. Let us create a formal partnership with you. We'll help source companies in your specific vertical. And so that's what we do is we'll find companies at the seed stage that are awesome, that are Black-led, that have this diverse, unique vantage point. But then we'll be working with our Series A funders to figure out exactly what they need to see in order to invest in the company. And then we'll work with that company for 12 to 18 months to get them ready for our partners to be able to invest in them. And so really what we're trying to do, our fund strategy is get not just capitalize our founders at the seed stage, but really get them into an industry specific leader by the time they're in Series A. That puts them on a much higher likelihood of acquisition and scaling.
Awesome. So, do you guys have any program to teach people about entrepreneurship or becoming a VC or something?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have two different nonprofits that are associated. So one is called Venture Partners, and Venture Partners is the funder side. So it works on funder representation. We actually have a fellowship that teaches women, people of color, people from rural areas, all without generational wealth, how to break into venture capital. And so we run fellowships every year. We actually just finished our second cohort. And so we run that. And so actually our next cohort will be running in the fall. And so if people want more information about that, they can just go to vcpartners.org, or, like look up our program director. His name is Luis, and then connect with him about getting into that fellowship. So that is for people who want to break into venture capital or capital allocation. The other part is we have Emerge, and that helps to be able to create an on-ramp for more people, diverse people, to be able to be small business owners. So thinking about entrepreneurship, how to make a side hustle your main hustle, how to utilize that as a career path. And so we have a series of programs. There's one that's the Emerge Initiative, another one is the HBCU program. And so we have a series of different programs for founders to be able to, and people who don't even know that they could be founders, to be able to help on the education front. We have a grant program to be able to help onboard people into product development and market launch. And so if you want more information about that, that's on our website. So if you go to bfm.fund and look at our initiatives, then there's the Emerge and there's a contact form if you want to be included in that.
Awesome. Listeners, if you guys are interested, please feel free to do that. And okay, that's something great. I'm really liking the conversation. I'm learning a lot too. I didn't know all this. I would like to help some of my listeners and some of my readers to give this information. These are very valuable information, and thanks for sharing that and taking the time. Okay,
Absolutely.
so as a VC leader, what advice do you give to the startup co-founders and particularly who are from diverse background, like you and
You
me?
know, I think that it can be really alluring, especially with Shark Tank. I feel like it's really romanticized venture capital. But honestly, what I tell most founders is that if you can actually be more customer centric and try and figure out different tweaks to your business model, that actually creates more sustainability and like longevity of your business and helps you learn a lot quicker. The more customer centric you are, the faster you'll be able to get to a point where you're really, really understanding what your customers need. The other part that I will say is early on, when you're trying to figure out your business model, a lot of times people will go to venture capital just for money. But there is something to be said about diversifying your revenue streams as a way to be able to understand different markets and different needs. Even within that same market, and to be able to like accelerate your learning, essentially doing like R&D, but trying to get different revenue sources through your business. So that's one thing I will say is I think it's like a lot of people say it, but it's largely overlooked, is like the focus on customers rather than investors really helps companies in the long term. Like right now we're having market volatility and a lot of investors have pulled back from funding, right? And the companies who are already customer centric and not focused so much on investors are faring the best because they were already focused on the people that were going to give them money in a steady way.
Oh, so tell me a little bit about the market, like what's going on. Like it's a little crazy. Like we can't trust
Yeah.
anything anymore. Anything can happen. So what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're starting to see it's the natural highs and lows of the market, right? When during COVID, there was like actually an explosion of money being poured into the money markets, and there was SPACs, and there was so much floating around. The valuations were high, and what we're starting to see in the last year and a half is that those valuations are coming down. There's a lot of market volatility that started in the public market, now has moved into the private market. There's some issues around the banking, right? And so like those things, I think when we look at like the economics are like natural like ebbs and flows. The particular scenarios of like SVB versus other things are of course like very specific, but like in general the market ebbs and flows, and right now it's in a lull, right? And so I think that it will come back again, but in the meantime I think actually founders that come from this particular era when the market is in a lull are actually the most successful entrepreneurs, because those are the entrepreneurs that are customer centric, are able to retain the most amount of their company, and are able to like more quickly stick on to exactly what their customer is looking for. And I think that helps them actually reach scalability a lot quicker.
Yeah, Airbnb was one of those company
Mhm.
who were born in 2008, 2009 era, and the
Exactly.
most successful one. And did SBV gave you any hard time or any of your portfolio company?
No, no, and I will say this that I think that both SVB and First Republic Bank have been incredible partners to the startup ecosystem. We personally have had such good relationships with people that have worked there. I think that the individuals that work in both of those banks have been really, really focused on the startup ecosystem and building a lot of community within that. And so I personally have had really, really positive experiences with both banks. And particularly with the individuals and their commitment to the ecosystem.
Okay. So looking ahead, what are your main goals for BFM and the coming years? Basically, I would like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that our main obviously goal with the venture fund is to be able to support our companies by being able to get them into more industry specific lead firms and having those individuals on their cap table. And so one of the biggest things that we'll be looking to do is to be able to build more partnerships with industry specific leaders at the Series A, Series B, and Series C stage. The other thing that we're doing is being able to reach out to industry specific investment bankers and private equity companies. And so that's something that, like, if the listeners or readers of your show are listening to, that is something that we're always looking for. The other thing that is coming down the pike is accessing match funding for SSBCI funding. And so that's something that we'll also be doing. And SSBCI, for those of you who don't know, is a program through the federal treasury. And so they give money out to states to be able to dole out into not just venture capital, other sources, but also venture capital. And so those funds are actually then, like, we source out matching funds from different private entities. And so that's something that we are doing as well. And so that's something we'll continue doing, is both matching as well as securing partnerships to increase our ability to help entrepreneurs in the next year.
Do you guys have any plan to open up a shop in New York?
Say that one more
Any
time.
any plan to open up a shop in New York, like you opened in Virginia and Oregon, I guess?
We're definitely open to it. We've gotten actually a lot of good leads and some good partners who have wanted to support us. So certainly, I think the BFM empire is expanding.
Oh, awesome! And are you New York based or San Francisco? What's
Yeah,
your
I actually go between the DMV in Virginia and Oregon right now.
Mhm.
But my wife and I are originally from New York, and so a lot of our family is still in New York. So we're there quite often.
Oh, awesome, awesome. How do you like New York?
I think New York is it's a really it's so unique in that you're never going to find anything as like incredible as New York. The accessibility with public transportation is unparalleled. The food, the culture. For us, it became a little bit much, just in terms of like living and working in the Bronx.
Mhm.
But we will always come back there, and that is our heart. That's our family, and so. But we enjoy living also in the DMV.
So you have family in Bronx.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm from Queens. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, yeah. I just been to Bronx like day before yesterday for a
Yeah.
birthday party. This five borough is like it's way different than any other place
Yeah.
in the world, especially Manhattan. Like you can find everything there, right?
I mean, literally anything and everything. I feel like one thing that we realized is we actually went to London and we went to Paris and we thought like, oh, how will we could we live abroad, right? And we went to India and we went to other places, my wife and I. And what we realized is once you've lived in New York, you can live anywhere else, right? Like once you've figured out the systems of New York, like everything else actually is pretty easy to figure out, public transportation wise, traffic routes wise. And so, yeah, we're really grateful to New York. I think that that will always be a core part of who we are, and it is a really, really good foundation.
Awesome. So, yeah, there's a saying that there is no experience like New York experience.
Yeah. If
Right.
you know how to drive in New York City, if you know how to utilize the public transportation of buses and trains and like utilize the transit map, if you can do any of those things, you will be fine anywhere in the world.
I'm really whatever you would like to share, like, where did you born, where you grow up,
Yeah.
schools and stuff like that, and first career starting, and whoever you are today, from the
Yeah.
day one until today, how did you came to this life? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am a first generation immigrant from India. And so we first moved to the Bronx when we came to this country. And then we moved to Connecticut after for a little bit of time. And I think both being a first generation immigrant and then also moving to this country and realizing the stark whiteness in it was really transformative as a young child. I think that what I realized is that a lot of people are overlooked in this country. Like my parents, when they first came to this country, didn't, they said certain words differently, right? And because of that, I think that they were really overlooked. I think to this day, they're really, really accomplished and smart. But when you see how they're treated in their jobs, there's definitely like clear discrimination and bias that hinders their ability to access the same level of service or treatment as their colleagues. And I think for me, growing up that way and realizing and really like putting a lot of emphasis in being able to speak with an American accent and being able to like be that person in between, I think I realized like if my own family and community are being overlooked just because of how they speak or they dress, then like how many other people are being discounted? And I think then when I got my first master's is in social work, and I worked in the Bronx. I think that I saw that over and over again, especially in Black and Latino communities. And for me, being a first generation immigrant, I think it was like easier for me to identify with the different groups within the BIPOC community because we were all in some way being oppressed and overlooked in the large like whiteness of today's society and the like especially in economic issues and like environmental issues and health issues and educational issues. There's a lot of whiteness that I think my early childhood experience and then like being a social worker first really helped to reinforce like how many communities and people are being overlooked in this country, not because of any merit, but just because they don't fit into a box, whether they look different, they act different, they dress different, they phrase things differently, then for me, I felt like, what can I do with my career to be able to bridge those two together? I actually left social work, being a social worker, but I was trying to figure out how to be more proactive. I eventually meandered through consulting and then went to get my MBA. And it was when I got my MBA, that's when I found out about entrepreneurship as a career. And for me, that's what I've been trying to do is just bridge the gap and utilize both my MSW and my MBA to be able to help create a bridge between people who are incredibly intelligent and resilient and capital efficient and being able to bring access to resources and knowledge of how to utilize that within entrepreneurship. And so that's like kind of what brought me here today. I actually got my MBA and then was really interested in working in venture capital and ended up working at 7 different venture funds and organizations before launching this fund. Just so that I could understand what it was like to work in an established organization, to understand the pros and cons and the practices. And then I also launched 2 economic development funds so that I would know like how to start a fund and how to like connect with LPs and how to do like the basics of doing fund management and then put those together to be able to raise this fund.
You have done a lot in your age, so I wish you all the best because you have done a lot already, and you're pretty young, I believe. I'm not gonna ask your age, but I know you're pretty young. Uh, am I missing anything that you would like to talk about or share? If there's anything I'm missing that you can share.
I think that one of the biggest things I find, especially being a social worker, is that the venture capital space and even the entrepreneurship space that is venture backable can be quite elitist. And there can be like barriers internally to being able to access knowledge and education and participation. At the BFM Fund, we really try to dismantle systems of oppression that also include access to participation. And so, if anyone who's listening or reading this wants to participate in venture capital, wants to support the BFM Fund in like furthering entrepreneurship, we'd be more than happy to chat with you about and ways to figure out like how to partner together. We are very much about collaboration and partnership. Every other month, we're announcing a new partnership that we have with different organizations, and that's intentional. We want to create accessibility to entrepreneurship and to venture capital, not just for founders, but also for individuals and organizations.
Okay, we can talk about this, and I would like to talk about that. And if I can do something for the community, which is obviously community with color, since I'm from Bangladesh, you're from India, we are pretty much like not pretty much we are neighbors basically, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you are in Bronx, I'm living in Queens. We are from the same city, and we know the vibe. You might try so many restaurants that I tried. So yeah, definitely we have some common ground to talk about. And I would like to say thank you for the time today. And I'm really grateful that you figured out the time and talk to me. And my listeners, they will be very happy to hear that. And the things that you are doing, I always wish you all the best. Okay?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And both myself and this little French bulldog appreciate being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Take care. Right? Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.